Witnesses are not here. Witnesses have withdrawn.
Well, after many months of protracted legal battles, the Kenyan cases before the International Criminal Court finally kick off with a hitch and under a cloud. Unprecedented in many respects, the cases facing Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Deputy President William Ruto pose perhaps the biggest test to the Hague-based court since its inception. Joining us to put in perspective the cases and how they're likely to unfold in the coming days is Professor Kithure Kindiki, Kenya's Senate Majority Leader. And also on the show is Ambassador Boaz Mbaya, a long-serving Kenyan diplomat. Gentlemen, welcome to the program today.
Thank you.
But first, let's take a look at how Kenya, a sovereign state, found itself and its leaders before the International Criminal Court.
From bitter rivals to ICC indictees to partners in power. The past 5 years have been anything but ordinary for President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, William Ruto.
Promoting national cohesion and unity has always been at the heart of their approach to their politics.
Prosecutors at the International Court disagree. They are convinced the two men were prepared to order mass murder in their pursuit of power. But it's been a rocky road to The Hague. The journey begins in 2010 when Kenya misses a UN deadline to set up special tribunals to try suspects for post-election violence. The matters referred to the ICC and its then prosecutor, Luis Moreno Ocampo.
Lubanga Armed Group.
On the 15th December 2010, Ocampo named 6 suspects, among them Ruto and Kenyatta. Exactly a week later, Kenya's parliament passes a motion to withdraw Kenya from the Rome Statute, the treaty that binds signatories to the jurisdiction of the ICC. In 2011, Kenya appeals to the United Nations Security Council and the ICC about the admissibility of the case. In March of that year, it sends then Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka to several African states, seeking support for the cases to be deferred. In 2012, ahead of election campaigning, Kenyatta and Ruto merged their parties. Asked about the ICC trials, Ruto jokes they could govern via Skype. Later that month, the duo wins the election, helped in part by anti-ICC sentiment. And the following month, the African Union endorses Kenya's position to have the cases delayed. On 5th September, 5 days before Ruto's trial is due to begin, his party drives a motion through Parliament, again seeking to withdraw Kenya from the ICC.
A sitting president and a deputy president elected in a free, fair elections, transparent, upheld by the Supreme Court of that land, are being paraded in a foreign court.
On the day the trial began, Kenya's foreign minister is in Addis Ababa lobbying for more AU support. Hours later, the AU writes to the ICC calling for Ruto and Kenyatta to be exempted from attending parts of their trial as they're busy governing Kenya.
Well, it's been a big week for Kenya and for the International Criminal Court. I'll start off with you, Professor Kindiki. This has been a big week for Kenyan cases at the International Criminal Court and as well for the Hague-based court itself. How big in your estimate?
Very big. Why? Because for the first time in the history of the world, you've had a deputy president of functional democracy being taken through a unnecessarily humiliating process, and that is historic in itself. Very big in the sense that the much hyped trial did not take off because the prosecutor was not prepared and is unlikely to be prepared in the coming days. So it's a huge embarrassment for the International Criminal Court, and I think that court will come tumbling down under the weight of the Kenyan cases.
Ambassador Mbaya, though, after years and months of hype, you know, the cases sort of got off to a wrong footing. One of the judges there even called it a shame. What's your view on what happened this week?
It is indeed shameful. We cannot run away from that. But it also expresses a point. One, we shouldn't be there. partly because the 10th Parliament refused to deal with a mechanism that could have dealt with these cases locally. And until we address the fundamental issues which caused the conflict after 2007 election, we have to face the consequences, unfortunately, internationally.
How did Kenya, though, find itself there? Because Kenya is today talking about itself being a sovereign state, but it is now facing, having its high-profile leaders before the International Criminal Court.
Kenya got there by design and by default. By design because voluntarily we signed and ratified the Rome Statute that establishes the International Criminal Court. But secondly also, Kenya got there because of a misunderstanding of and lack of patriotism on the part of the leadership which was in place that time at all levels. Because I think if we had dealt this thing locally, this embarrassment, this humiliation should not have taken place.
We will not discuss the merits of the case itself, but I want to get a clearer understanding of what is happening really at the ICC in respect to the Kenyan cases. There is talk of the fact that witnesses are failing to show up. The prosecutor is talking about there were 42 witnesses, now 22, now unknown. What is going on?
There is no case, okay? And that problem has been caused by the statute itself. And that's why I'm in the front line of saying, let us withdraw. We are encouraging as many other countries as possible to withdraw so that we can renegotiate a better statute. The biggest challenge of the ICC is not the judges. In fact, some of the people sitting in that court are the finest minds, legal minds we have. The problem of that court is the prosecution wing. That office is unsupervised. It is an office, and I'm sorry, it has also to do other than the legal weakness in the statute,
right,
which does not require any supervision of the activities of the office of the prosecutor. The kind of people who have held that office, first of all, Louis Moreno Ocampo, and our sister from the continent now, Fatou Bensouda, are a big disappointment in terms of their quality as prosecutors. Number one, no investigations were carried out at all. A few NGO reports written by program officers of NGOs locked up in Nairobi, funded by a few Western governments, formed the basis of peddling the rumors that are now the basis of those cases. So there was no investigations at all. The latest episode where a letter written by a Kenyan, and I'm not trying to undermine the importance and the integrity of any single Kenyan, one letter written by a Kenyan opposing those cases being transferred to Kenya, because most of the judges were convinced these things should be taken back to Kenya, influenced 4 judges to vote against the cases being brought to Kenya on the basis of a single citizen. And I'm waiting to see how that voice becomes so fundamental as opposed to the voice of, let's say, the Parliament of Kenya, the Senate of Kenya, or even the African Union, or the 53 member states.
Let me bring you in here, Ambassador Mbaye, though. Is there a general feeling in Kenya now that perhaps the ICC may be failing in its task of providing international justice?
That may be the case, but there are 3 points we need to make. The first is what publics are we addressing in this particular matter. The ICC has 3 faces for Kenyans. One is the international public. The international public addresses questions of impunity. And the cases in the Hague arises out of what was perceived as impunity. The second public is domestic, and it's divided into 2 segments. First segment is for the accused. And there is a big percentage of people in Kenya who support the accused. There is also the third aspect, a big percentage of Kenyans who support the victims, the rest of the victims. Nobody's talking about that. Now, if we are going to pull out of ICC, to me, in principle, is a contradiction in terms. One, we are saying the president, deputy president, and Mr. Sang's cases must continue. That means you accept, in principle, the validity of those charges in the ICC. The second thing is we are saying after that, we pull out, and then future cases don't have to go. It doesn't make sense. And I think the political leadership in this country needs to sit down and work out why what message to pass on to Kenyans as regards the ICC?
Senator, I see you're shaking your head.
A different view. We are all concerned also about the victims. And that is why we want also to listen to what the victims are saying. The victims are saying, we better solve these problems here. When my sister Fatu Bensouda tried to go to Eldoret, she was booed. But she was told off. She was told, we are the victims. Nobody came to ask us a question.
Ambassador, just a quick question before we go to break. Do you think the international community is engaging in double standards?
I don't see that possibility. One, we took ourselves to The Hague. Everybody was saying, don't be there, go to The Hague. Why are we now criticizing The Hague? Two, when you look at countries like Cote d'Ivoire, it is the president of Cote d'Ivoire who took Gbagbo to The Hague. Look at Bemba, Jean-Pierre Bemba in DRC. It is Kabila who took Jean-Pierre Bemba to The Hague. President Museveni, for instance, we were very happy to deal with Kony in The Hague. The problem comes when it deals with African leaders in office.
All right, gentlemen, we'll stop it there for a moment and return in a moment. But let's also hear what Africans across the continent have been saying about Kenya's cases before the International Criminal Court. I'll start off with Abdul Shibu Sapele in Nigeria, who says, why is the ICC always going after African leaders instead of people like George Bush Jr. and Tony Blair for their role in Iraq? George Kublai Khan Fosi of Yaoundé in Cameroon says the ICC is racist and illegitimate. Stanley Dos Samir in Nairobi in Kenya says the West is intimidating Africans. Our president and deputy president will come out clean. Another comment from Nimrod Kogo in Nairobi, Kenya, who says Kenya is a sovereign state. It will be a mass withdrawal from the ICC by almost all African nations when the motion passes. And another one from Nini Bright in Kampala, Uganda, who says everything from the ICC is a nightmare to an African leader, and that is why many have now refused to step down. And a final one from Kevino Temesi in Naivasha, Kenya says the court is using power to bring what we call neo-colonialism to Africans. Well, we'll take a short break now and return in a moment.
Culture Express. See the world in color.
Make major investments in China.
Why we are living for?
That's a fundamental government.
Position on China's
for
by leaders.
I think yes. Frustration would be
have a dialogue, political change and human rights. Don't you think you should?
Dialogue. Ideas matter.
Welcome back to the program. Now, Kenya has passed a motion to start the process of removing itself from the Rome Statute that created the International Criminal Court. Several African countries have voiced support for Kenya. But how exactly can Africa's relationship with the ICC be described? Let's take a look.
Veuillez vous asseoir.
Day one of William Ruto's trial. And even before it began, the International Criminal Court has been on the defensive. For months, the African Union has been accusing the ICC of pursuing only African leaders. ICC representatives in Kenya have been trying to counter this.
That is completely a misperception. It is not correct. It is out of place.
Still, the ICC's caseload is heavily focused on Africa, where it's investigating in the DRC, Uganda, Central African Republic, Sudan, Kenya, Libya, Cote d'Ivoire and Mali. It has arrest warrants out for Sudanese leader Omar al-Bashir and Ugandan rebel leader Joseph Kony. And those it's detained awaiting trial include former Ivorian leader Laurent Gbagbo. The court was set up in 2002 to deal with crimes such as genocide and crimes against humanity. It has been ratified by 122 countries, including 34 in Africa. But other countries such as America, Russia, China, and Israel are not signatories. And some countries, notably Kenya, are now reconsidering their involvement. The ICC says it maintains popular support, even in Kenya.
Over 60% of the people surveyed still believe in the court. They still believe that justice could be better served for the victims of the post-election violence by the ICC.
There is no doubt that this trial has raised the stakes for the ICC, and many Africans will be questioning its credibility. Kofa Mrenje, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, it's likely that several African countries that are members of the Rome Statute could follow in Kenya's footprints in the coming months or even years. So where would that leave the ICC, and what next for Africa? Well, still with us on the program is Professor Kithure Kindiki and Ambassador Boaz Mbaya. Professor, Kenya is seeking a withdrawal from the International Criminal Court. What message and who are you sending that message to?
First of all, the withdrawal from the statute is envisaged. So Kenya is not creating a process that does not exist. So there's a reason why Article 127 of the Rome Statute says a country can withdraw, and this is the process.
Why does Kenya want to withdraw?
It wants to withdraw because I think there has been a huge miscarriage of justice, and that miscarriage of justice has arisen out of the structural deficiency in the statute. And as far as I'm concerned, and we have, as you know, I'm listed to practice in the ICC. I would want a better court, and I think what we have advised our country is that perhaps we need to seek a review of that statute altogether and create a more honorable court.
But the ICC says even if Kenya seeks a withdrawal from the Rome Statute, it will have no effect on the running cases.
We are not dealing with the current cases. We are very much aware about that provision. All what we are saying is this, that it is only the 6 Kenyans who have gone to The Hague as a result of a faulty statute that will only be exposed to that kind of humiliation. Kenya's withdrawal will have a huge domino effect, not only from Africa. We're also getting solidarity from even Latin America, a bit of Asian countries. I've just had a meeting with our foreign minister, who is preparing now. As you know, the African Union has convened itself, the entire membership, to Addis Ababa on 12th and 13th of October to discuss the Kenyan situation. And top of the agenda is withdrawal. So we are not trying to play monkey games. We seriously believe the national interest of Kenya and similarly situated countries is threatened if we continue being party to a court governed by the current legal framework.
All right, Ambassador Mbaya, where does this leave Kenya, though, the whole question of wanting to withdraw from the Rome Statute?
I would be very happy if the cases in the court at the moment were decided by the court. Therefore, Kenya didn't have to threaten to withdraw. You cannot withdraw just on the basis of political support. At the end of the day, African countries, each one of them, and you can count it when it comes, are going to take decisions on the basis of their national interest. Let us look at what is in the interest of this country, rather than simply to say we have solidarity from Latin America, Africa, and wherever else. No, countries are going to take decisions on the basis of national interest.
What impact, though, is this going to have on Kenya, internationally, for instance?
It has several aspects. The first, it minimizes our capacity to act as an international actor. Professor, I'm sure understands that. Because people tend to think, other leaders will tend to think, now look, why do we go and associate with so and so, which is wrong. Kenya is a democratic country, is a free country. Let the cases be decided by the court. The second aspect, we are the largest economy in East Africa. Now, we have a common market, and if we are not careful, the signals we are sending out is investment is not secure because of political risks in Kenya. They will invest in Tanzania, they'll invest in Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi, and they'll still use common market mechanism to trade with Kenya. So we are losing out in terms of leverage.
Is that what's going to happen?
That is not true. First of all, I don't know which countries my brother, the ambassador, is talking about. China is not a member. Russia is not a member. United States of America is not a member. In fact, when the US was withdrawing from the statute, the reasons they advanced are very similar to the reasons we are advancing today. So don't listen to some, junior diplomats in Nairobi who's trying to say how this will happen. In fact, they told us before the election, you elect Uhuru Kenyatta, that's the end of Kenya. Your goods will never leave. In fact, now, those countries Balozi is talking about are scrambling for attention. Secondly, wait on 12th and 13th of October. You'll be shocked. The withdrawal movement is not empty talk. And we believe it is justified. Thirdly and finally, we also want to say this. It is time for African countries, Latin America, and other smaller economies to start auditing all our international obligations, most of which we have signed blindly, and that is at the core of the poverty in this continent, and see which ones work for us, and the ones that doesn't work for us, we walk out.
Let's look, though, at this whole issue of you're talking about African countries are reconsidering their obligations with the ICC. Where does the relationship between African countries and the ICC stand today? Because there are several countries, as the ambassador has mentioned, that would be willing to still hand over, particular people to the International Criminal Court to face international justice.
That position has changed. He's talking about the ICC at the time when Kenya was submitting itself to the ICC a few years ago. That is the time when Museveni was referring the matter to the ICC also. But you've heard President Museveni talk of late. So this regret is not something that is catching up on Kenya alone.
Why is there a shifting tide across the continent?
Because the court has been exposed for what it was. It was presented as a court of justice. It has turned itself and proven itself to be a court of politics.
Is that the case, Ambassador?
I think we are trying to interpret what we think the court should be or should have done. If we have problems with the International Court of Justice, can we reform it? Withdrawing is not an answer. And I don't think a credible international actor of international law should be behaving that way. I don't want to be misunderstood. I would like my president and my deputy president and Mr. Sang to be cleared. But let the court process take its due course. Not run away through political support, no.
I think it is not correct for the ambassador to say that if you ratify a treaty, you are stuck there for better, for worse. A treaty is not a marriage.
Ambassador, Africa is having a rather interesting or tough relationship now with the International Criminal Court. What should be the solution here?
Africa signed up to the Rome Statute voluntarily. Africa should be able to debate what ways the continent should apply as a political force to reform the system that they signed up to as sovereign countries. The moment you sign up to a treaty, you are limiting yourself in certain cases as regards sovereign decisions. And that's what has happened in this particular case. We are crying foul for nothing. Let us also educate our people so they understand, even if you have to pull out, these are the reasons, not necessarily because the court is simply failing. Why are we accepting the current cases to go on? And then we advise Kenyans that we don't want to be part of that court again. We are accepting the court now, but we are saying tomorrow we don't want it. It doesn't make sense.
We are not accepting the court. It is the statute that says so. That if we withdraw, the cases that are ongoing will not be affected. So there is no contradiction. Yes. And we have said we will live with that. Good enough. So we are not just talking about the current cases. And I don't know why Ambassador is still a bit hazy. We are very sure they are not affected. So this business about we are fighting because the current president is indicted or the deputy president is a voice which is coming from people who lost the election to the president. Simple and clear. Simply because they lost an election. Secondly, Beatrice, I am very ashamed as a Kenyan to hear a fellow Kenyan saying that we are a banana republic and the only justice we can get is out there.
Is there faith in the Kenyan judicial reforms?
I think we haven't demonstrated enough because there are no structures even today. Why hasn't anybody been arraigned in court for the atrocities committed in 2008? We talk about capacity. Where is that capacity? And how can you convince not the international community, but Kenyans, that there is that capacity if nobody, families which burnt in the violence, have not received justice, if nobody has even attempted to deal with those questions?
All right, we're going to take your closing comments in a moment, Professor, here, but do you think, is it your view that the collapse of the Kenyan cases before the International Criminal Court will mean the collapse of the ICC?
Yes, and you want to listen to the legal representative of the victims. That is exactly what he said. I quote, "These cases, if we follow this trend, are headed to collapse." Yeah. And that will spell a death knell to the International Criminal Court.
Your winding up comments.
Winding up, it is unfortunate that a few people in the NGO world who are not patriotic, and a few leaders who lost the election to President Uhuru Kenyatta, took advantage of the horrific events that happened in our motherland in 2008 to mortgage the country if we have to heal Kenya, if we have to bring justice, truth, and reconciliation in a credible way. We need a model that mixes prosecution and other quasi-prosecution outcomes. And I'll give one example because there's no time. For example, if you take a politician who is proven to have committed a crime and there is evidence, then you ban them from holding political office for 20 years. It's called lustration. Lustration curtails the ambition of that politician without necessarily opening up the wounds we are talking about. Jailing politicians can only ignite a civil war.
All right. Ambassador Mbaya, to you as well, do you think the collapse of the Kenyan cases before the International Criminal Court will mean a collapse of the ICC? And your final comments.
I don't think it will collapse the ICC, but to lead to reform of the ICC. But in making my final comments, I want to salute the President. He has declared complete support and collaboration with the ICC in order to clear his name. That is the way Kenya should go, not the way of threatening to withdraw just because we don't agree with one particular aspect of that particular court. I want also to underline the fact that the President's decision is very important for this country because it helps lead Kenya to a credible democratic state. And therefore, we are unlikely to be censored as long as that cooperation is exercised. And that's probably the best statesmanship position that the President has taken regarding this particular matter, which affects him personally.
All right, Ambassador Boaz Mbaya, long-serving Kenyan diplomat, and Professor Kithure Kindiki, Kenya Senate Majority Leader. Gentlemen, thank you for being here with us on Talk Africa. Well, that has been Talk Africa from Nairobi. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Bye-bye from us.